Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Stacy McCuddy.
I'm Nick Wiegand, and tonight's conversation is going to be beauty matters, shaping tastes for the true and the good.
So pumped about this.
You're excited? All right.
Yep.
Well, it's funny. So I'm in construction, and I have a friend who he constantly tries to give me a hard time about the idea that it has to be just functional and he doesn't care about form. And so I always kind of like go back and forth on form and function. There's a balance there, right? But I genuinely do think beauty matters. If we live our lives in such a way where it's only about just as long as it works, we're good, we get into a very, I think, a very dull life. I'm going to let you kind of speak on the philosophies of that, because I know there's a lot of philosophies that would ring a bell in people's minds, but kind of flesh out the philosophies there that we're kind of fighting with here.
I think it's if you overemphasize the pragmatism, the idea that it should just simply work, then it is sufficient. There's a ring of truth. We want it to work, but we don't want to reduce it to just that. And even when it comes to things like architecture, this is something that when we travel around, I was with a friend and he was pointing out different kinds, and there was one that was a little distinct, and it was, to me, it was like, it's just kind of ugly, like that, like this is kind of rough. He's like, this is actually called like brutalist architecture is the word for it. And when I think back, like, and I look sometimes when I look at the medieval, and I love like the cathedrals, I love like the Gothic architecture and these things, and there's an element where sometimes they serve no purpose whatsoever except for ornate, except for that beauty. And I think you overdo that as well. And so I think there becomes this indulgence. I think you've got the pragmatism. I think also there's in the postmodern architecture where then it just becomes weird. And it's like there's actually no purpose and there's no meaning. Like, it's not even pretty. It's just odd. It's just expressive. And so I think when this idea, what happened in our modern world is truth and beauty sort of got kicked to the subjective side. Like, that's just your own subjective personal experience. So there's no real beauty. Beauty is the eye of the beholder. And this is why when we try to talk about these things like actual beauty, like, oh, it's all in the eye of the beholder. But whatever is true, there's a beauty to it, and the two go hand in hand. And that's why we're always talking about truth, goodness, and beauty. They're inseparable. It's like width, depth, and height. They're all part of the same kind of thing. You're just looking at it from different aspects. And so with the modern thought that there is no truth, then there's not going to be any beauty. It's only subjective experience. And it's not a new idea. I know we hear a lot, but people like Immanuel Kant, we bring him up sometimes. We're talking philosophies of like the 1800s,
right,
that have influenced today in our thinking. And so this whole idea of an actual true and an actual beautiful, not just what's true to you, not just what's beautiful to you, but that there is this thing, because if you take those out, then you're left with nothing but something like function and cost effectiveness.
And I mean, there is a subjective nature to some things that are beauty, but I think like what you're kind of boiling it down to is there is an objective beauty. There are things that are objectively beautiful, but then there are some subjective things. Well, so you're not saying everything is objectively beautiful or ugly.
So to clarify terms, there's always a subjective experience, and that's what we call the aesthetics. So anything that must be looked at must be perceived, and I am saying that there is an objective beauty, because beauty is one of the attributes of God.
Right.
And so that's why somebody might look at God and subjectively find him horrific because he goes against everything they value. Okay. That is a genuine experience on the part of that person, but that doesn't touch the object. And I think that's why with what we talk about, that things that are well made and things that are the things that God's created, there's a beauty that's there. You may not personally enjoy them. They may not bring you that same experience. But I don't want to ever, and I think this is our big problem, we confuse our subjective response with the thing itself. And that's why when we talk about this idea of the true, no matter what you think about it, truth is truth. You might misunderstand it, you might misperceive it, but the truth is what it is.
Right.
And there's a beauty that's there, and the beauty is found in the thing that God has made in the form of it. And so that's why you mentioned, the philosophies that are involved there. These are old ideas, an old philosophy that, God is the source. He is the I am.
Mm-hmm.
And from the source of I am comes all the things that are, and they all participate in his truth, in his beauty, in his goodness, because they are. And the further you move away from what a thing actually is, that's when you get into ugly. That's when you get into, like, the rust on a car is not beautiful. It's a corruption. You might like the patterns it makes. That might aesthetically please you. But the rust is actually bad. It's,
right.
And you should recognize this. This makes for a bad car.
Destructive in nature, yeah.
Right. It makes for a beautiful pattern because patterns exist. But this thing is destructive to the very nature. You can't call it a good car or a beautiful car because it's actually, there's a corruption that's involved there.
Okay, so I'm going to read Philippians 4:8-9, and it says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things, which you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." And so kind of the focus was shaping the tastes for the true and the good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this verse says, look, everything that is of God, these beautiful things, these true things, these honorable, commendable, that is what we're supposed to focus on. And I think that's what ends up shaping the tastes of it. And you said you were really excited about it. So why is this such an exciting topic?
Well, I think Thomas touched on it a little bit, is, that we live in a culture that loves, relativism, that loves, this is true for me, or I think this is pretty, or beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like, everything is subjective. And we focus so much on the individual,
Mm-hmm.
and, what I think is true, what I think is beautiful, what I think is good, that we've just completely lost sight of that true objective standard of beauty. And like I said, it becomes kind of controversial because you do get into that. Well, I might find a certain painting beautiful, but you might think it's hideous.
Right.
We're attracted to different things. But I really like the distinction that Thomas made, that your experience of an object, or your pleasure, or attraction, or whatever you want to call it, can be different than someone else's. But whether that object is beautiful in and of itself, there is an objective standard to that, because it's beautiful in the sense that it's properly reflecting God and properly reflecting his creation and his order. So, just like you said, rust is not beautiful. Chaos is not beautiful. Like, I can't think of the right word, but art today is, an expression of self or whatever. And it's not true art. It's just like, let me be evocative. That was the word I was trying to think of. Let me just be as evocative as I possibly can to get a response out of people.
Right.
And let me just create this weird thing just because it gets a reaction. Or
You're
it gets
talking
a
about
response.
the more modern art
Yeah.
that's kind of popular. I mean, there's still artists who create true and beautiful things.
Absolutely.
But, you're
Absolutely.
talking about
But when people
this
are
culture,
creating
yeah.
something just for that evocative response, their goal is not to create a beautiful object.
Sure.
Like duct taping a banana to a wall is not beautiful.
You stole my thing. I was just about to say, like, the whole, there is an element, like I like duct tape. I like a good piece of duct tape. Don't get me wrong. And I also like bananas. So true statement. I like duct tape. I like bananas. So a banana, duct tape
But they're
to
not
the wall.
beautiful.
Well, they are beautiful in their order, and particularly because of duct tape and its utility. And bananas are tasty, and so there
provide
is
potassium and
yes,
Yeah, okay.
they're it makes for a good supplement to my
This
breakfast.
is such
So-
a weird conversation.
But I mean, there's this element. I'm not against bananas and duct tapes and these things, but the whole idea that we're going to tape a banana to the wall, and we're going to call this art. And the reason why we talk about art is because the Greek word is where we get our word. We talk about technique. And so part of what in the human experience, the artisans were the ones who created good things, and they created them well.
Yeah.
So you create a chair. A well-made chair is a work of art, but it's a
Right.
practical. The fine arts exist for no other reason than to be enjoyed.
Mm.
And so that's why when you go to the art museum, you're not looking for, it's different than like my boys. We like to go to IKEA and the furniture stores because it's, look at the cool things. Look at this. Like they enjoy these items. Laughing at me. But
Well, you just went from artisan who makes well-made chairs that can also be beautiful to IKEA furniture. But go ahead.
understood. Well, it's a different kind of beauty that's there, the way that minimalist and other components. Anyway, so again, there's different sides to this, but you're going to go into the fine arts and you're going to tape a banana to the wall. You've not achieved that. Like in the fruit store, like the bananas are really good and you make a display. I got that. And the display of bananas are pretty because this is the bananas. So when you're in and you're looking at the what we'd call art, we actually do this in one of our worldview talks that we're going to be giving this year in South Africa, that we have an image of the Sistine Chapel, like the ceiling. And then we have, and I forgot her name, but the title of it is called Her Sordid Bed. And it's like her bed after a wild night.
Mm.
And this is her art. And so we put these two together and we're like, these two things are not the same.
Yeah.
That to try to have a worldview where these two things are equal
Mm.
and are of the same nature, you've misunderstood the nature of what art is and beauty. And there is an element that when you look at, like, if you were to do this kind of artistry and you're trying to represent this lifestyle, there is something that it speaks to that, but they're not the same.
So if the conversation is shaping the taste of the true and the good, so I think you brought up something was the worldview will absolutely shape that taste.
Mhm.
And so if you have this worldview, this Christian worldview, where you are whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things which you have learned and received and heard and seen in me. Practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. If you do this and you have that Christian worldview, it will shape that taste. But if you have that atheistic worldview, which seems to be creeping in much stronger and quicker, it's the banana taped to a wall, or the weird bed, or the toilet that, sits in the middle of a room. That was the one I saw that I was just like,
Yeah.
what is happening?
Mhm.
So as parents, and there's a lot of parents that are probably listening to this, or a lot of people are listening to this, but when you say the fine arts, they have absolutely no concept of what that is. They've
Mhm.
never been to a theater. They've never been to an art museum. They've never experienced these things. How do we teach our children these things if we ourselves have no education in this, no experience in this? How do we shape these tastes? How do we shape the taste for beauty? Let's just start with that one. Truth seems a little easier because we can point to truth a little bit easier. How do we shape the taste for beauty?
I think it begins with God's creation, that when you appreciate what God has made, and then the ways that we can represent this, like whether it's through fine arts, or even when we look at how he's made us with the minds that we can design something like a chair. Like, I know people are like, oh, well, animals build things like beavers build dams. And I'm like, yes, they build in a very rudimentary way, but no beaver is going to chew out a chair the way that humans can make a chair. There needs to be this
I
start.
don't think you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia. But go ahead.
I have actually. I'm familiar, but there's this element where when we're not appreciating the complexity, like, I think this is one of the reasons also naturalism robs us of the idea of beauty. Everything becomes just a accident, a chaotic result of
Yeah.
particles banging against each other.
Mhm.
So you no longer you just look at the leaf and you're like, what a lovely little accident. You got to recognize this is something God designed.
Yeah.
This is actually what we did with our kids in our homeschool co-op. As one thing I did is took them outside. Let's look at the design. Go grab something that's design. It was your granddaughter that grabbed a lizard, by the way, and she's like, "Look at this," and I was like, "But you're not wrong. Like
Yes.
there is design."
There's a lot of design in that one.
Yeah, and so they were pulling pine cones. They're pulling, one kid, he had the pine cone. He's like, "Oh, I got these like little pine cones." Like, understand what God has done and how that all of these trees are because of what they're able to produce and why they do it and how this works. There's a beauty in appreciating what God has created. And when we appreciate his creation, then we're able to appreciate the beauty of the things that we do and the use of our skills. And so to bring it down to the parent, this is what I was just with my kids today, had a big sheet of paper, and I was like, okay, we're just going to collage this, whatever you want to draw, go for it. So I got all three of my kids and myself. What are we going to do? And we're all operating according to our talents. I'm going for geometric shapes because that's my safe zone. Like, I can do this and not feel ashamed. So my youngest, he's frustrated. He's like, I can't do this well. He tried to do an airplane. He tried to do this. And there's an element, it doesn't look like the right thing. But I told him, appreciate the fact, look at what you're able to do. Look at where you are now. And I was even able to show him, look at what Joel is doing. He was actually doing this like little dragon thing. And I said, I remember when I used to sit down with him and he liked to mix all the colors, and I had just a gigantic canvas that was brown. That's all it was. And it was not even a pretty brown. It was just ugly brown. And, so we sat down and I'm trying to help him appreciate the ability he has. And I said, and also enjoy what other people do and look what this is becoming. So there's an element as a parent when we're trying to not just what the scripture says, he's not saying whatever's true to you,
Right.
whatever is beautiful to you, whatever's
Nice.
true,
Yeah.
whatever's beautiful, think on these things. And so with my family, with the kids, to appreciate the simple abilities they have, looking at the creation. And I think it's worthy, and I'll say this because I remember when Stacy and I, before we were even dating, we went to an art museum in Chattanooga as a part of the thing we were at. So that was the first time I was ever at an art museum. I was 16 years old, and I hated it. I was miserable, but because I didn't understand the nature of art. I didn't understand, and I had nothing on my radar about the beauty and to appreciate even pictures that are simple, like how difficult those things are to do, to produce, that the skills that go into it. I had no idea. So it took years for me to learn. So that's the kind of thing I look to and try to encourage parents. Like, this may not be your strong suit. I cannot, like I said, I was drawing squares and triangles. Okay. I'm not a good drawer, but to join in with my kids and produce these kinds of things and to appreciate what is good, to utilize our skills, it's a shift in our mindset, and to not allow the world to dictate, just do whatever. Like, no, there needs to be this element of let's pursue, let's think.
Well, I think one of
Let's
the things you kind of identified on is a shift in mindset of, instead of focusing on all the negative and things that we can't do, instead there's an aspect of focusing on the positive things around us too that I think may shape beauty a little bit more, because we're out of the negative and looking at like the good that's around us. Is there a way that, so Stacy, you have influenced my life of appreciating probable beauty in the fact that I've read some classic books that I never would have touched. And so, in all manliness, I read Pride and Prejudice, and I was thinking this is going to be an effort of futility, but
And you loved it.
loved it far more than I ought to. And so there's this element where there's beauty that can be found in things that I never would have thought would be something I would enjoy. So in your home, how do you foster this environment of shaping the tastes for these things, other than making me read a book I thought was going to be stupid and then followed with more classics and more classics?
Well, I was just going to say that beauty can be found in anything. I think we focused a lot on art, but there's beauty in music, there's beauty in language, which is kind of what you're referencing. There's beauty in math, there's beauty in science, there's beauty in everything.
She said beauty in math. You should have been able to do that one.
There is.
And
That's why I do geometric shapes.
and
Oh my goodness.
and the beauty of math, I mean, this, we really want to go like deep. I mean, math itself reveals to us the mind of God, and that's where beauty originates, and that's where, you know, truth originates, all those things. So math actually is beautiful. I know lots of people will disagree with me, but but just,
That's why she likes
you know, just
You're good at math.
going, you know, I just want to kind of open that up for people, that beauty is not just art, you know, that beauty can be found everywhere, because again, all of the created things, all of the things that we can think and reason to originate in God, and, you know, as that true source of beauty and order. And I think our world tries to tell us that chaos is beautiful, and let's just mix everything up, and let's just be whatever we want to be, and anybody can be anything and do anything, and go against the design and the order that God has shown us. But back to your question, you know, and when Thomas was talking about, you know, his first experience at an art museum, and, you know, that he just hated it, is because his appetites or his tastes were not developed towards that. So it can be as simple as just exposing your children to those things. And it goes back to, you know, a previous episode. If your appetite, your own appetites as the parent, haven't been shaped, you know, towards those things, then you can learn and grow in that experience of beauty right alongside your child. You know, listening to classical music, reading classical literature, looking at beautiful art. There's all kinds of resources for that. That's another class that we have at our co-op that I teach, is just called Wonder and Beauty. And that's what we do in that class. We read high quality literature. We read picture books that are made with beautiful images, not AI created images. You know, then we look at art, we listen to music. And so it's all about exposing children to those things that truly are beautiful, and developing their appetites towards them. And the things that we experience in our homes, and the things that we're putting towards our children, this was kind of specifically in relationship to books, but it can apply to all things. Like, if you are constantly, like, you're giving your child two choices, like you present them with a piece of watermelon and you present them with a bowl of ice cream, like 99% of kids are going to choose the bowl of ice cream. You know, there's going to be that one or two kids that, you know, like watermelon more than ice cream, but, you know, most kids are going to choose the bowl of ice cream. And the same thing is true when we're talking about beauty and developing their taste and appetites towards beauty. Like, if you're constantly only giving them ice cream, or just, you know, things that are not high quality, and just presenting them with, you know, TV shows, books, movies that are not engaging them in any way, and are not beautiful themselves in any way, or are not presenting truth about the world as it really functions, if you're always feeding them those kinds of things that are just, in a way, just really insignificant, like they're not having shallow. Yeah, they're just not having any sort of impact on the child, and not shaping those tastes, then that is where their appetites will go. And then they're going to walk into an art museum, and they're going to be like, what in the world is this place like? And they're not even going to be able to recognize beauty, because they've never been exposed to it at all.
So if we just shove CGI down their throats, and vapid magazines and entertainment, then constantly they're never going to want the good.
Right.
Not that CGI is a bad thing, you know, like, I love a good Star Wars movie, but if it's not coupled with, I mean, I didn't see my first theater show until I was an adult, and wow, I love it. But if that's not balanced for the children, they're just going to crave the vapid and shallow instead of the deep and beautiful and true.
Exactly.
And I think to wrap it back to your first question, because what Stacy had mentioned, like with the beauty of math and the different things we study in school, I think some of our philosophy that I hear with school, like when we're doing the math, when am I going to use this in my life? Goes back to really translate, how is this going to make me money? There's an element of, you learn these things because they're true, and because they're good, because there's a beauty. And we're not teaching to appreciate it. So I was like, no, I want cash value. I want this, you know, why I had, when I was a youth pastor, they were doing a set on Shakespeare. Why am I having to read Shakespeare? I was like, because you're joining in the human experience that thousands upon thousands of people have read and experienced. And when I was in middle school, my teacher even said, she's like, one day, the educated, they tend to use these references and they'll cite, like Romeo and Juliet and this and that and the other. And I just thought that was the stupidest thing ever. And then I remember like when I just kept doing that and kept going back to so many Shakespearean
Right.
quotes that connect.
Because
That's why
it's a deep
there's
beauty.
there's a truth, and there's a
Right.
beauty to the way that Shakespeare said it, which is
Mhm.
why he's endured.
Right. So I think it's important that we do shape these tastes, and otherwise we'll just go along with the world like everything else. Appreciate the conversation. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast Virtuous Roots on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.